Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a really brand new recipe that I just came up with on my own for Salisbury steak. This is low carb and gluten free if you use all gluten free spices. So here we go. First thing we're going to use is 1 pound of ground beef. I have lean ground beef. I guess you could make chicken if you wanted, or turkey, but you know, traditionally it's beef. We're also going to have some Lipton onion soup mix, but of course you can use beef mushroom, beef onion, any of that stuff that you like. Also, you can use generic as well. You also want to use some dried minced onion as well as some onion powder, and we also have granulated garlic here. Um, we have mushrooms and onions because traditionally there's mushrooms in Salisbury steak gravy, and onions always just enhance everything and make better. I am also going to saute a red onion for serving on the side. Now for my gravy, I'm going to use 1 can of gluten-free cream of mushroom soup. I'm using the Walmart brand, as well as Walmart's concentrated beef bone stock. It's concentrated and it's really delicious, and it's very inexpensive considering how much you get for that bottle. We're also going to use some oil and butter, but that's just a matter of choice. Depends on what cooking vessel you're going to cook in. So we're going to do this all in the electric skillet at the table because, as you guys may or may not know, I am currently battling cancer and cannot cook at the stove. So it is what it is at this moment, and we have to love it and live with it. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by cooking down a red onion. Jim actually said that the red onion we had was he thought it was going to be like going bad soon, but the red onion was actually like perfect. It was the white onion that looked good on the outside that actually was crummy on the inside, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I also want to tell you that some of the cooking is done at this angle, but then I realized my hand is kind of covering all the chopping and cutting that we're doing. So we're going to switch it up around, okay? So if you're new to peeling and chopping onions, then you just want to like cut off both ends, cut it in half from tip to tail, and then I peel all the onion skin off. If you're going to finely dice it, you want to leave the root end on. That's just the tip, and you can use the skin peeled back on the root end to actually hold it down. But I'm going to make rings because I'm going to, or half rings because I'm going to make like just like a caramelized onion topping. Now, of course, I didn't mention salt and pepper to taste because that's a matter of diet and personal preference. We don't really cook with black pepper around here because mom doesn't really particularly like it. So we just add it at the meal at the end. But you definitely want to have salt when cooking, especially onions. If you don't want to put on a lot of salt, that's fine. What you want to do is you want to put a little salt on the onions, draws out the moisture and helps them caramelize better. Keeps them from burning and drying out. I have this electric skillet on 300 degrees, which is about like a medium-low burner, okay? Well, really like a medium burner. Depends on your burner. So I have been raised to not wash mushrooms because mushrooms soak up all of the moisture when you wash them. So what we do to keep them clean and to not eat dirt is we use a wet paper towel and we wipe all the mushrooms down. When we were growing up, my father actually used to use mostly canned mushrooms. But then when we got to eating like more healthier, fresher food, it was just wipe your mushrooms down. When he would do large bulk cooking or put the mushrooms in, say, pasta sauce, it was kind of a different story. He would just run them quickly under the faucet in a colander so that as to not let them soak up a lot of water, but as to not be wiping off 40 or 50 mushrooms. But I just take a wet, damp paper towel and I don't worry about the stem end because we're going to cut that off. And I hold the stem end while I clean up not only the mushroom, but you want to go under the cap and make sure that there's no dirt under there. I do have this cooking at 2 times speed because otherwise boring. But just to give you an idea, I have the onions caramelizing with no cover on them at first, and then I'm going to cover on them in a little bit. Because depending on your cooking vessel, sometimes they'll actually start to brown faster than you want them when they're cooking down. This was only my third or fourth time using this cooking vessel, and I am still learning. It's kind of like what temperature is what compared to a real stove. So if you're an expert at your cooking vessel, you know, you want to cook the onions low and slow so that they can caramelize and let all that moisture out and really cook down nice and even. While that's happening, as you can see, I'm stirring often. Oh, I'm caramelizing them in olive oil and butter combination. Sorry about that. I meant to say that. So, drizzle of olive oil, a quarter, 2 tablespoons of butter for one large red onion. Meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice up my mushrooms. What I do is I like to take the container that they're in, wipe it down before I wipe the mushrooms off. This way I can put the cut mushrooms in there and kind of make a mise en place when I'm ready to go ahead and make my mushrooms. What I like to do is cut this tip of the stem off. I cut one side of the mushroom so that it can lay flat on that side, and then I cut straight down and I make slices. If you have an egg slicer, sometimes egg slicers will work well enough to cut through mushrooms. They actually make mushroom slicers. You can use your mandolin or your bucks, whatever you feel more comfortable with. You can get canned mushrooms if you want to, if that makes you more comfortable as well. These are white button mushrooms, but this would also be fantastic with baby bellas or portobello mushrooms. Any kind of not really heavy, dense. You wouldn't want to use a giant portobello mushroom cap or whatever. Just some light mushroom. Excuse me. Sorry. Some light mushrooms would be really, really great in this dish. Okay. So the other thing whenever I make mushrooms, it's always got onions in it. Mom doesn't really care for the she loves the taste of the onions, but not to eat pieces of onion. So when we cut the onion down for our mushrooms, we cut it really, really finely diced. And we're going to show you that here in a minute. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the nutritional value of this dish. We did talk about being low carb. The only carbs in this dish will come from the onions, which there is a little bit of carbs in onions, but mostly it comes from the gluten-free cream of mushroom soup. Now you can forego that entirely. There are ways to thicken gravies keto if you're interested in this being a low carb keto meal or a zero carb keto meal. You can use allulose, but what you would want to do is, I feel personally, to add a little cream to the gravy. So what we're going to do here is going to make it simple and easy. We're just using a can of soup and a can of water with the other ingredients we talked about, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But if you're going to make this totally keto version, you want to use some bone broth with your mushrooms and onions. You want to use some bone broth. You could use some of the Lipton onion soup mix as long as you check your package and make sure that it falls within your dietary guidelines. And just add a little cream to the gravy as it starts to cook down. Okay, and then you can always thicken it with, like I said, with allulose. That's what I like to thicken my gravies with. There is also xanthan gum, but I find that the allulose to be a little bit more forgiving. There's also arrowroot. That's also keto friendly. Okay. Now, like I said, the onion that we looked good on the outside actually had a rotten part on the inside. So we're doing the same thing. We're going to cut it in half. And then we're going to, just one layer of the onion was rotten, and then it started to invade the next smaller layer. So I just cut the end off of the smaller layer and took the rotten layer out. And it's really not rotten like it will get you sick necessarily. It's more like over ripened. It wasn't mildewy or anything. It's just not good. It's a little slimy and it's not so great tasting. So we want to go ahead and toss that. But the rest of the onion is good. Okay, so we're just going to finely dice the onion. So what we're going to do is make a couple of level cuts, level with the cutting board. Well, almost level. You want the tip of your knife to go down towards the cutting board slightly. Being very, very careful like this. We're going to make some what we call horizontal slices. Then we're going to go down with the tip of the knife and make some vertical slices. And then when we do is we cut across both of those, it'll make a really, really fine dice. Now, when you get to the end, you can just throw that piece out. You can throw that piece in soup, or you can just continue to chop it up like I am here. This is what Pop taught me. Basically, put your hand on the back of the chef's knife, put the tip of the chef's knife on the cutting board, and just rock it back and forth until you get a really fine dice. The one big mistake I made cooking this meal was I could only reach the small cutting board. I couldn't reach the large cutting board. So I would definitely recommend using a larger cutting board when you're doing this process, because you can see I'm picking a lot of onions up off the table. Okay. So I also have a couple of serving dishes off to the side that we're going to need while we prepare things. What we're going to do is just scoop up all these onions. They're just about done. Put them in this bowl off to one side of this bowl. I'm sorry, my arm's in the way. I realized that this was a great angle for cutting board, but not a great angle for me being a righty. This is why you usually watch me on my left side. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil, and very little because there's almost none left in here. And another 2 tablespoons of butter. And this is Kerrygold butter if you're interested. If you're doing keto, you know all about Kerrygold butter. And I'm going to put all of the onions that I just chopped, the white onion, finely chopped white onion, and the sliced mushrooms in. And then you want to give them a toss pretty much right away, and you also want to throw a little bit of salt on them as well. And the reason we do this is a couple of things. First of all, it draws the moisture out of the mushrooms and the onions, just like we talked about with the onions. And the other thing is you want to toss them around right away so that you can get fully coated in all that oil and butter, okay? And I'm just giving them a small sprinkling of salt, okay? And then just give them a toss. And these ones we're also going to cook down a little bit, and then we're going to put the cover on them to let them cook a little bit, like become tender faster. It's just a trick, that's all. All right, while I clean up my space and get my hamburgers ready. So pretty much what we're going to do, and there are hamburger patties as opposed to mini meatloafs. So we are going to season them with granulated garlic. This is a little bit over 1 pound, because Jim, and if you guys know, watched hauls of ours, we get the 4 1/4 pound large 93% lean, 7% fat ground beef from Walmart, and we cut it in 4. So it's just really a tiny bit over a pound. I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of this Lipton onion soup mix, but don't worry, we're going to use the rest in the gravy. And we're going to use some granulated garlic as well as minced onion and onion powder. And you can season as you like. This is about a teaspoon of granulated garlic, a teaspoon of onion powder, and about half a tablespoon of the minced onion. Now we do the minced onion as well as the Lipton onion soup mix. Mainly because we can. No, because we like onion. And onion is the main profile in this dish. Garlic is only secondary. Now, if you feel like you need to add a little salt, if you're a salt lover, you're only using 2 tablespoons out of Lipton onion soup mix, so I would go ahead and salt the beef, because beef itself does want to just drink up a lot of that, okay? Now, I'm blending it very well. Unfortunately, my meat wasn't fully defrosted, and I wasn't aware of that until I started blending it. I found chunks of frozen meat in there, so I was just breaking it apart with my fingers, using the warmth of my hands to go ahead and break up all the frozen pieces, because I wanted to make sure I distribute those spices evenly. Now, a lot of recipes that you'll find online will call for breadcrumbs or possibly even egg as a binder, but these are more like hamburgers, and if you don't put a binder in your hamburger, don't put a binder in your Salisbury steak. You know what I mean? I hope so. So I'm just going to keep working this. You don't want to overwork your ground beef. You just want to make sure it comes together, but you don't want to overwork it, because then it can get too tough and grainy. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm taking, since I can't go to the sink as often as I would like to, I'm taking a wet rag that's full of soap Jim brought me before I started cooking, and washing my hands between touching different meats and vegetables and stuff like that. Okay, so give the mushrooms a stir, set them off to the side. I do have this on medium-low, as like I mentioned before. So now that I have the meat all combined, I'm going to set it into like an even shape. That's all that makes a difference. If you make a rectangle or a circle, it doesn't make a difference as long as it's an even thickness through. Because what you want to do is just use the even thickness to cut it into 4s and make 4 equal sized patties. You can do like the whole weighing system if you want. You don't have to. I'm just making them into roundish patties. Now, I wouldn't, normally with a hamburger like this, we recommend poking a hole in the middle or denting the middle so it cooks more evenly. But this is actually going to cook in the gravy. And if you make it too thin, it could get too dried out. It could get too hard and too like tough. So don't do that. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the mushrooms are cooked to a doneness that Mom likes, basically. Most of the mushrooms are going to finish cooking in the gravy, but Mom likes to have her sauteed without the gravy, so we're going to leave a little bit on the side for her. So I'm just putting them in the bowl with the onions, just off to the other side. And there is quite a bit more of these than there are of just that one onion, as you can imagine. Okay, And we're not even going to clean the pan between because all these flavors are going to marry. It's going to be wonderful. I'm taking the rest of the olive oil. Maybe, maybe not. Not really sure. It's not really. And then just spread that around. We're going to fry the burger patties. The only reason I'm adding oil to this pan is because this is very lean ground beef. If you have a 86 lean or something like that, you don't want to have to add oil to it, okay? Plus, this is a non-stick electric skillet by Cooks, so that also makes it not necessary. So now we're going to make the gravy, prep the gravy really well. We're going to take the rest of that package of Lipton onion soup mix. We're going to squirt about a tablespoon or two of the bone broth concentrate, as well as the whole can of Great Values gluten-free cream of mushroom soup, and just dump that all in there. And then this is me calling for help and nobody's hearing me, so I am going to leave the table while I roll over to the refrigerator and get some more can of water. I'm going to cut this part out. I'll be right back. So I just got a can of water from the refrigerator, just the mushroom soup can, and just to add some liquid. Otherwise, these flavors are all very concentrated. The soups, both the broth and the soups, are all concentrated, so you want to definitely water them down. Now, I don't have a whisk. Normally, I would whisk this to try to get all the clumps out. And plus, it's cold water, so everything's just being nice and clumpy. So it doesn't look very appealing, but trust me, it'll taste good in the end. Now, I did squirt in some more of that bone broth because initially I only put in about a tablespoon, and I just squirted in a second one afterwards because I was looking for a specific color. I don't know, I was kind of looking for what I consider Salisbury steak color. Now, I am flipping these, and I'm slightly pressing down in the middle. I'm not trying to squeeze out any juices. Trust me, there's not that many juices in this meat to begin with. But I'm actually just trying to keep that dimpling a little bit under control. You know, it'll puff up in the middle. The sides will shrink in, and then it'll make the top puff up a little bit more. I was just trying to keep that a little bit under control. So we're just going to brown it on one side. We're going to brown it on the other just for a minute or two. And then we're going to go ahead and add all of the things back basically to the pan. We're going to add the mushrooms back to the pan. We're going to add the gravy to the pan. And that's what we're doing. We're just checking for doneness. Like I said, it's just a few minutes on each side. So I'm adding the mushrooms. And again, I'm leaving some for my mother-in-law. And not the grilled onions, just the mushrooms and onions. But if your family likes grilled onions, go ahead and add extra grilled onions. I'm serving mine on top. And then I'm adding all of the gravy mix that I put in that bowl. Now, I'm not worried about the raw meat being in there with the gravy mix because we're going to go ahead and cook it down. So that's okay. All right. And then we're going to put this on medium low or low, depending on your burner. And we're going to set a timer for 15 minutes. So set your timer for 15 minutes and go. But then we're going to do is at the 7.5 minute marks, we're going to come back halfway. And halfway through cooking, we're going to turn the pan. If you're doing this on your stovetop, or I'm doing it on the tabletop, I'm still turning the pan because my table isn't quite level. And I don't want them to cook unevenly. And then I'm going to flip each burger patty over. Each Salisbury steak is going to get flipped over to have even doneness, or else you don't want that all the flavor to be on the bottom, soaking in all that gravy and not the top. Okay? Now, depending on how thick you make your patties or how many you have, depending on their cooking time, forgive me. But like for these ones, these are nice and thick, and that's about 15 minutes is about what we want to do. Actually, it's going to be about 14 minutes, but you'll see what I mean. So then we're going to flip them over, make sure everything's nice and even, cover them up again, and finish cooking. And we're going to set the timer, and we're going to stop it with 1 minute left. At 1 minute left, we're going to take off the cover, and we're going to take out the patties, the Salisbury steaks, and we're going to put them on the platter that we're going to serve them on. At this point, they should be done, but if you want to check your internal temperatures just to make sure that it's at least 165, you could. But trust me, they're done. 15 minutes of sitting in this simmering gravy. They're done. So I'm going to put them off to the side. Now I'm just going to leave the cover off, and I'm just going to stir up my gravy, make sure it's nice and thick. If I need to boil it down at all, if your gravy is not thick enough, then you can go ahead and boil it down. If you're making the keto gravy, this is where you want to go ahead and add the thickener. Then once you do, everything goes back in the pot. If you decided not to use cream of mushroom soup and you wanted to make some homemade gravy, again, this is where you would add the thickener. You could just make a cornstarch slurry, which is about 1 to 2 teaspoons of cornstarch into 1 to 2 teaspoons of water. Mix with your fingers until it's dissolved, and then stir it and boil it down as it thickens. Then shut it off when you've got it as thick as you want. So now this particular pan has a warming setting. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on warming. I'm going to leave the cover just askew so it doesn't overcook, and then serve it. We served it with cauliflower mash, garlic cauliflower mash to be exact, some glazed carrots, and corn with butter. Now that part's not keto, but it did remind me of a Hungry Man dinner, and that was the look I was going for. So if you guys enjoyed this recipe and try it, let me know, sharing on all the social medias. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. If you want to see more cooking videos, just let me know in the comments down below. And as always, you guys, if nobody's told you you're loved, you can always come by and hear how much I love you, because I do love you very much. And as always, you take care. God bless. And we'll see you next time. Bye.